So I want to welcome everybody to the 258 afternoon show. And I know I put 3 o'clock everywhere, but that's just to give us a little warm up so that I can catch up with Johnny before the show. And I'm so excited to have you with me this afternoon, by the way.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with you.
I could not wait for the interview. I'm not even lying. I could not wait for this interview.
Well, I appreciate that.
I don't even know where to start. I just want to tell you one thing, though. I'm probably going to be different than most of your interviews because I'm so laid back, and I'm really excited about this. Now, you are a man of many talents. Like, I've been listening to, like, a lot of your older interviews and just, like, doing a lot of, like, reading and, like, your YouTube videos and... Like you need a promoter like me, okay? Like they need to be seen more. Like I was just like, oh my goodness! Like look at these videos that I didn't even know that you were on.
Yeah, that's the problem with our current culture is that everybody thinks that once you get a film deal or a publishing deal or whatever the case may be, that you're well taken care of. But nowadays, due to technology, which I'm not a fan of at all, I'm a very antiquated man, but the companies want you to promote yourself. Well, let's catch 22 because you can't spend all day promoting yourself because you're not getting new work done. So for me, it's like I throw it out there, hopefully people find out, but I can't spend all day just promoting away because I need to work on new material. So I need to work on new films and new books. So it's difficult,
I imagine because you're a very active person. I see there's so much that you get into. And it's like I wanted to back up a little bit because first I want to get to where did you come up with the horror? Where did you start? When did you like really find a passion in horror?
I mean, there's definitely a passion for horror. It started when I was a little kid. I would say my biggest love is more of like the mental psychological thrillers. I'm a huge fan of Alfred Hitchcock and Rod Serling with the Twilight Zones and the Night Galleries and, just filmmakers such as those likes. I'm not really into the guts and blood and gore. But growing up in the 80s, I did love a lot of the slasher films. But, yeah, mostly, my early loves were as a child. My family, and still to this day, their favorite holiday is Halloween. So it was always a huge deal in my family, and my father would play a lot of practical jokes, especially around Halloween, and also his brothers would. I often talk about the time when I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and my Uncle Bill was taking care of elderly patients out of his home. He ran like a hospice, and... It was in October. My grandmother and I were celebrating a co-birthday, and my Uncle Bill turns to my cousin Jesse and I, and he said, "Would you like to meet Dracula? I have him in the basement." We're like, "Yeah, this is awesome. We want to see Dracula." So Uncle Bill takes us down to the basement, and lo and behold, there's a coffin. And he needed his coffin, because he was taking care of a lot of sick elderly patients. That, it was not uncommon to lose someone. So he shows us the coffin, and he says, "Yeah, climb inside." So like little kids, we were like, "Yeah, okay, cool." So he opens up the coffin, we jump inside, and he slams the lid shut on us and either sits on it or puts something on top that we couldn't get the coffin lid open. And then I was like terrified because I'm in the pitch black coffin at the age of 4 or 5. I think Dracula's coming out to get me. So while I was afraid, at the same time, I also loved it. And it just really, it's just something that's always been a part of me since childhood, so...
That is wild, but that's kind of cool that your whole family. See, my favorite holiday used to be Halloween too. So, and my kids are gone now, so it's like really, like I don't have, the whole instinct to do it anymore. Like I used to go all out for Halloween.
You should still do it. My house is decorated for Halloween all year round. I'm sure that the neighbors look at me like I'm insane. We just actually had new neighbors move in next door that bought a vacant house right next to ours, and they came over the other day to introduce themselves, and there's a giant wooden jack-o'-lantern hung on the front door, and you could see as soon as we opened the front door that all the Halloween decorations are still up. That's all year round. So, and if people would still dress up and go with me, I would still go trick-or-treating. But everybody's like, "I'm too old for that," so...
That's funny. That is so funny. I can't imagine. Like, I can see where you're saying now that's whole. Did you come into the books writing like that too for the author?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a very macabre child, and maybe it is because my family, you know, I don't think that I recall watching anything too obscene when I was a child, but my father did let me watch a lot more horror than what other kids would watch. You know, I was really young when I saw Psycho for the first time, and we loved all the Abbott and Costello, Meet Frankenstein, Meet the Mummy, Meet the Wolfman movies, so much. But a funny story, I was probably about 4 or 5 again when I started developing a sense of mortality and how long I would be on this earth. And in one particular story that I recall very well, around the age of 4 or 5, I just sat down on the kitchen floor out of the blue and just started to cry. And my mother comes in and she's like, "Honey, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" And at that point in time, even though I was only 4 or 5 years old, I had figured out in my mind at that point in time that the average lifespan was around 74 years of life for the average American. And I was crying, and she said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Mom, I only have 70 years of life left to live." And she's like, "What are you talking about? Like, what? You're insane." But these are things that I've always thought about ever since I can remember. So, you know, death and mortality and how long we're going to be on this earth. And I think that might be one reason why I take on so much and try to do as much as I can possibly do in many different genres.
That is
but it
wild.
does work great to, you know, write horror stories, and, you know, I wouldn't consider my films necessarily horror per se, although they are psychological terrors. So.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I wouldn't consider it. Looking at them, I could see the Alfred Hitchcock. I could see the you know, the whole thing, and I see that where they call you the modern day Edgar Allan Poe. So I can see where that would come from.
Pardon me?
I can see where that would come from. You know, the Alfred Hitchcock, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, with the Poe, that was a great accolade, which was bestowed to me by TE Magazine. It's a publication out of Europe. And when I read that, it really took me back, because Edgar Allan Poe was always my first love. But I never aspired to emulate Poe, because there's only one Poe. But the thing that was really uncanny about being labeled as the modern-day Edgar Allan Poe is that Poe was my first literary love. I used to live in Pennsylvania. For the past 5 years now, I've resided in Baltimore, home of Edgar Allan Poe. I got to visit the bar in which they found him dead outside of.
Oh, wow.
I got to visit his homes in Virginia, in Baltimore, and unbeknownst to me until a few years ago, my grandfather, whom I never met because he passed when my father was only a couple months old, his greatest literary figure was Poe. And my birthday, October 7th, is also Edgar Allan Poe's death date.
Oh, my gosh.
There are just so many weird coincidences and similarities between Mr. Poe and myself. So, but again, you know, I never thought I'm going to sit down and write a book and be, you know, the next Edgar Allan Poe. I think that it gets compared to that because it's all done in rhyme and it's very macabre. But that story was actually a screenplay in which I had written for one of my previous films, and the film never got made for several different reasons. And a friend suggested, "Well, you have a really great story here. Why don't you turn this into a book?" So I literally sat there and converted it from a film script into an actual novella. You know, so, I mean, the fact that people compare it to Poe, that's great, but I really hope that people don't perceive me as being someone who's aspiring to be Poe, because you can't replace the man. I'm just very macabre, and a lot of times when I do write in rhyme. Not always, but, you know, it depends on the story.
That is wild. So, see, I could see that where it all fits together. And it's amazing how you do that. I just can't believe all the different talents you have. You had mentioned, too, that you, I was looking back at, like, the past. Now, when did you start this? Was it around 2012 when you started doing your first movie, or before that?
Oh, before that. My first film was in 2010.
Oh, okay.
And it was a 20-minute short entitled Samhain Night Feast. And I never really thought that I never aspired to be in the film world. I was just sick of Hollywood, because you'll find as you get to know me that I hate everything. Like, I was sick of Hollywood, especially Hollywood horror films. Constant remakes and sequels, nothing new being made. It's all
right.
before. So in 2010, I grabbed a camera and I gathered a group of friends. I wrote a script, and I thought, we're going to make a movie just for ourselves, just for something for us that it'll be fun. We'll drink, we'll make a film, and it's something that we'll want to see. I never anticipated on anyone else ever finding out about the film, but once the film was completed, I would say probably 2 to 3 weeks after the film was edited and put together, my cousin emailed me and said, Johnny, did you hear that Samhain Night Feast is playing at the Bastards of Horror Short Film Festival, which is held in Pittsburgh, was held in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania? And I said, no, how in the world did they even find out about this? Like, this is just something I made for us, my friends. So I contacted the festival. I said, hey, I heard you somehow found out about my film and you're showing it at the festival. And if that's true, I would like at least 2 free tickets to come watch my movie and, and be there. So they confirmed that it was true and it played. So I went there with no expectations. I thought, I'm going to be going up against seasoned filmmakers, people that have went to film school. I had no prior knowledge. I had always wanted to be a musician and ended up years prior walking away from a record deal because of artistic differences. But that's where I always thought that I'd be, not in the film world. But when Samhain Night Feast premiered at the Bastards of Horror, it ended up winning the best film of the festival. So, and then I had to go up and do a Q&A afterwards. So it was then at that point that I realized if I could make a 20-minute short without even trying and have it win a film festival, what could we do if we actually started a legitimate production company and did this for real? So that, in a very condensed Cliff Note version, is how I entered the world of film.
Wow. I never knew that you had something to do with music, that you wanted to do music. I had no idea.
Well, I actually compose a lot of the music for the soundtracks for my films. For instance, my next film, which is finished but not released yet, it's entitled Noctambulist. It's a 1920s black and white silent German expressionist style thriller. I composed 2 songs for that, which appear in the end credits, and I wanted to compose the entire soundtrack, but I just didn't have the time with everything else. So I composed 2 songs for the soundtrack, had a very talented vocalist by the name of Jeannie Goodwitch, who was in a band from Canada called Curse in the Woods. She did the vocals to it after I sent her the music. But yeah, originally I think it was 1999 or 2000, I had a record deal with Falger Music out of Italy. And we actually, the record company, it was a small label, but they had a European tour planned. And I got to hear the final mix of the album just weeks prior, and I hated it. And I play keyboard, so everything I write is very orchestrated. A lot of strings, cellos, violins, I had a lot of pianos. So when I heard it, they had added a lot of reverb and different distortion effects that I didn't even recognize that it was my own music by the time they had the final mix. So I said, no, this isn't going to fly. You either change it back to the way that I wrote it and remove all of these effects, or I'm walking. And they called my bluff, and I said, well, then I'm taking my stuff and walking. So I walked away from a record deal, like I said, probably 1999 or 2000. And, from there just kind of
drifted.
Lost my love for anything corporate-wise, anyhow, and decided at that point that I would just stay completely underground.
Yeah, I think.
I make the rules.
Yeah, I was just gonna say where you make the moves. That's kind of what I did in 2008. I left, and I was tired of being that corporate robot. And like you said, they tell you what music to do and what music to sell and what music this and like you said, a lot of the music it's digital and they add all this stuff to it. And I deal with what is the fad thing that goes on radio and stuff, but my personal taste for music is a lot different. And it's crazy. Things have just changed so much over the years in music that I've always been a music fan, so it's just hard. But it's crazy because I think, I'm going to have to inbox you later this song that I'm going to close the show with, because I think it'll fit your liking, and it's from overseas, actually. And I've been following them a couple of years, and their music's just, it's orchestrated.